having associated metadata so that if you want to know when an image was created, who created it, it's a way you can get that information. So now we are doing the underlying technology and the research work to make sure those capabilities exist as we deploy these more widely. So those are all examples of the kind of work you can do with the lens.
Let's take 128 Mindanao Avenue, South Quezon City.
Of safety and responsibility.
So you used the term inflection point earlier in our conversation. You know, we've all seen technologies come, arrive, you know, and it feels like the next big thing. Some are, some aren't. This feels different. This feels truly transformative. Is that how you see generative AI? And, you know, could project a little bit longer term future, then how does this technology remake what we do?
The AI is a deep platform shift. Many years ago, I called the AI the most profound technology humanity is working on and will ever work on, more profound than fire or electricity. And that was the reason we said our company is going to be AI first. So I do think it's a deep platform shift. It will touch every aspect of our lives, every aspect of society, every industry sector, if you will.
That was Fabio Di Giannantonio, wasn't it? Hurtling through the gravel trap there. You see it was snaking left and right on the...
But it is important to understand, while we are talking about AI broadly, generative AI is a moment in time, and it's one aspect of AI. It's just that these large language models are now useful enough to use them in a variety of scenarios. But I think there is more progress to be had, and I do think, you know, we'll go through some moments of ups and downs, but the progress, I think, will continue. But generative AI is just one facet of the broader progress we are making with AI overall. But I do think it's important to prepare for it. I think we should channel all this excitement to make sure other stakeholders are getting involved. I think this is an area for sure where...
In 500 meters, exit to E5, NLEX MacArthur Highway Link Easton Ramp.
You know, governments will have a role to play. Non-profits, academic institutions, international countries needing to come together and developing frameworks by which they can align for safety and responsibility. So all those systems need to adapt, and that's going to take time. So we need to embrace the excitement and channel it in a way in which, as society, as humanity, we are building the foundational blocks to tackle what's coming our way as well.
So there's talk in the air of regulation. Would you welcome regulation in this sphere? And what's the kind of regulation that we would need where, you know, companies like yours could still innovate, but as you said,
In 300 meters, exit right.
we would ensure safety and other things?
The way I think about it is it's too important an area not to regulate, and also too important an area not to regulate well. You know, you have to get the balance right. And when a technology in its early stages and developing, you know, you have to allow for innovation to proceed, but at the same time building in the capabilities and effectively the safeguards that you would need. So I think regulation will play a strong role. I think, to me, you know, at least speaking from a US standpoint, you know, I think the most important regulation which we can pass, which will also help AI, is a stronger privacy foundation. So privacy regulation and framework, which we still lack. A national privacy bill, I think, would be a foundational approach, I think, because AI can build upon that. I think there are many sectors today which are already regulated, and AI can naturally, you know, fit within that framework. If you're in healthcare and you're deploying systems today, you go through a lot of regulation to get that done. And so I think AI can fit in that framework to start with. The main areas I would think about it is, you know, what is a framework by which, you know, governments or regulators can validate the models that are being developed and make sure they are safe for public use. And I think you can have a progression in terms of how onerous you make them, but I think initially it's both building the capabilities amongst governments, and so thinking through the right agencies, the right regulatory bodies who can have oversight, and over time, both imposing requirements, and you have to be careful because, you know, you can't make the regulations onerous. That means the big companies can do it, but you know, you stifle innovation from startups or from the open source community. So it's going to be difficult to get this right. So I would focus in more initially on building the capabilities in terms of, you know, developing the actual talent and abilities to interact, form the right public-private partnerships, and over time codify it into better laws. But I think it's got to be a multi-stakeholder process to get there.
We solicited some questions from our subscribers beforehand, so I want to ask one of them. This is from Faf who's in North Carolina in the U.S. And the question is, you know, how should companies think about training and adapting their non-technology workforce to support the generative AI journey strategy?
I think it's a great question. I think you know, in every organization, I think it's important to unlock use cases and deploy it in the context of your workflows. I think one of the interesting things we have learned about these models is we call this fine-tuning. You take these base models and in the context of your organization, fine-tune it based on the data of the organization, and they can really start working well for the context you have. So I would think about, you know, deploying it in the context of these organizations. It could be as simple as, you know, we're building this into products like into our productivity tools, be it Google Docs or Google Slides or Google Sheets, and others are doing the same. So you can imagine getting your workforce used to this notion of working collaboratively with AI assisting. And I think that mindset change is going to be important for organizations to go through, for workforces to adapt. And so I think that's where I would start. But I think it's important in any organization from the senior most levels, you're thinking about what are areas which you can transform by deploying generative AI. And, you know, to me, I was excited, last week we announced this, but Wendy's has used generative AI so that people can, use voice and as part of that drive-through, order, and the system works that way. What they've learned, people speak in thousands of different ways. And so to use the AI system to make that process more efficient.
In 1 kilometer, use the left 2 lanes to continue straight on E5, NLEX Harbor Link East.
I think that's an example of an organization applying generative AI in a way that delights their customers, their workforce is becoming more familiar with it. And so I think the sky is the limit in terms of how you can imagine to use these things, but I would get the journey started.
Well, so a little bit more on that. So if somebody's watching this and they're like, okay, this sounds pretty cool, I don't really know how to apply it in my company. I'm not sure if there is an application in my company. How do you get started? How do you get comfortable with technology and figure out its potential?
Today, many of these companies are using a cloud provider. So I think it's
in 300 meters, continue straight.
Good conversation to start with your cloud provider. Hopefully it's Google. To talk about, we all have, generative AI.
Continue straight on E5, NLEX Harbor Link East.
Guys, tools and solutions which we can apply in the context of your business.
In 900 meters, use the left 3 lanes to continue straight on E5, NLEX Harbor Link East.
So that's where I would ask the question and I would get pilot programs started. I think people tend to overthink the initial approach. I think literally this is about seeding your organization with 4 to 5 pilot ideas, challenging your organization from the top down and saying,
in 300 meters, continue straight.
Where all can you apply generative AI, seeking ideas, and then getting a few pilot proposals underway. And I think that gets the organization thinking about it. It's almost like a new
continue straight on E5.
Muscle memory you need to develop. So there is and so to me, it's about challenging your teams, your leaders, and
In 2.8 kilometers. Turn right on 128.
getting a few pilot ideas.
So let's shift gears a little bit. The tech sector and including Google has taken some hits in recent months. We've been layoffs, spending cuts, what happens in a cycle like this. What's your expectation for the severity of this downturn, and how are you trying to weather the storm and emerge from it stronger?
We've taken so much as an economy, as a global system, and the war in Ukraine and to rising interest rates and so on. So there's a lot of factors. And so at this point, I think the right thing, and I think what most organizations need to assume is that that these tough conditions are here, and you have to constantly work on making sure your organization is adapting. From a Google standpoint, I've approached it with first is it's important to stay the course in terms of driving innovation for the long term. I think that's what over time will separate
In 1 kilometer. Use the right lane to turn right on 128 Mindanao Avenue South.
back from the companies which will get this moment right. Particularly for us, sensing this moment at the point of inflection with AI, we are focused on investing in R&D, driving that long-term innovation that is needed today. And if anything, doing more of it through a moment like this, I think is extraordinary. So that's an aspect of weathering this moment. The second part of it is to do the first part well, you have to make trade-offs. And so really going to first principles, having clarity about what are the things of all the things you're doing that really make a difference for the long term, and hence sharpening your focus as a company, driving efficiency, and making the tough decisions needed, and doing that on a sustained,
Turn right on 128 Mindanao Avenue South.
ongoing way is what will allow you to build for the long term well. And so it's doing both, which is not always easy. I think you're always pulled towards doing more of the latter, but I think it's important to get both right. And at least at Google standpoint, focused hard on making sure
In 500 meters. Keep left to 128 Mindanao Avenue South Underpass.
we are investing both for the long term and doing that well at the same time using this moment. It's a moment of clarity. Having all these constraints actually drives clarity, and so you dig deep and find what really matters, and then you focus the organization more on those things.
So you're CEO of one of the most recognizable brands in the world, and you're CEO at a time where the rules have kind of changed. The rise of social media and the expectations are that CEOs do more than run companies effectively. That they need to have a public presence and take stands on certain issues and address their own workforce, sometimes publicly, if they're not happy with something. And it's very complicated. How do you think about this evolving role, and what is the role of the CEO in 2023?
It's a good question. Something I think in a Google context has meant a lot as well. I do think the world has evolved to a place where, as a CEO today, you have a lot of stakeholders. It's not just your shareholders or your customers, it's your employees, it's the communities in which the company operates in. So it's important to keep that in mind. I think the way I've approached this is, I think you have to be clear about the few issues that really matter to the company and could matter to the company because it matters a lot to your employees.
In 300 meters. Keep left to 128 Mindanao Avenue South Underpass.
Or it matters to the company because you want to be a good citizen in the communities you work in, etc. But having clarity around the few issues, the few values you stand for, and being consistent about it, I think is more important. And I think where you tend to drift is by spreading yourself too thin. So what I've tried to do is being clear about the values we care about as a company, and be it sustainability or building a diverse workforce, and making sure we stay committed to it, but committed to it in the context of the work we do, and the fact that it would drive a better company in that process. So I think that's where maybe you want to have a framework with which you're working on, but I do think it's important to keep all stakeholders in mind as you're running a company, and doing it with empathy, I think, is more important than ever.
When I think back to the days when Google was founded, I feel like its ambitions were relatively limited and relatively clear. Now the company is much bigger. There's much more going on. How do you think about, what is your big ambition, I guess, for the company now?
I mean, we set out our big ambition many years ago, and we said we felt fortunate that our mission is timeless. Having a mission to organize the world's information and making it universally accessible and useful. If anything, or with time passing, it just felt more relevant than before. So we feel fortunate with that. But what's excited us that AI allows us to pursue the most ambitious version of that mission. So we think about it as how do we, and we are focused on 4 main areas. First is to improve knowledge and learning. Second is boosting creativity and productivity. Third, which has been important to us, it's not just for us, we want to enable others, other organizations, be it companies, be it nonprofits, be it governments, to use AI to make their organizations better. And finally, and arguably the most important of it all, is to do it safely and responsibly.
Keep left to 128 Mindanao Avenue South Underpass.
Ambition, and doing it in a way that it benefits everyone. Is what
In 4 kilometers. Keep left to U-turn slot.
on with the company, and we can be more excited about it.
So building on that, I want to bring in one more question from we solicited from our subscribers. This is from Antonio in Portugal. The question is, we've seen Google experiment with various moonshot projects. So Sundar, if you had the chance to pursue an entirely outlandish or whimsical project, what would it be and why?
We are working on quite a few. We're trying to solve quantum computing, which is as moonshotty as it gets, or we have other efforts underway. Maybe I would say 2 things. One, I think if we could do more, and we're doing it today by supporting other companies, so we don't need to do it ourselves, is to work hard to enable a technology like nuclear fusion. I think providing abundant, clean, renewable energy at an affordable price point, is as game-changing as anything I can think about. Is my life got transformed by getting access to computers and technology, and gaining the power of products like Google in my hands. I think with AI we have the chance. A moonshot is, I think over time we can give every child in the world and every person in the world, regardless of where they are and where they come from, and access to the most powerful AI tutor, which can teach them anything they want on any topic. Obviously, it needs to work in conjunction with their teachers and parents and so on. But I think a promise of something like that is real, and that's an example of a moonshot. I'd get super excited about it.
That's Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, who was speaking with me at HBR Live, Leaders Who Make a Difference. And we have more episodes and more
In 1.6 kilometers. Turn left on 129 Congressional Avenue East.
podcasts to help you manage your team, your organization, and your career. Find them at hbr.org/podcasts, or search HBR in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This episode was produced by Mary Dew. We get technical help from Rob Eckhart. Our audio product manager is Ian Fox, and Hannah Bates is our audio production assistant. Thanks for listening to the HBR IdeaCast. We'll be back with a new episode on Tuesday. I'm Adi Ignatius.
Brett McKay here, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Manliness podcast. Have you been languishing in the same role at work, frustrated that you haven't been promoted to a higher position with more pay and different responsibilities? My guest can help you level up in your career. His name is Randy Ornstein, and he's the author of Grow, the essential guide to getting promoted. Today on the show, Randy explains why getting promoted is more beneficial to your paycheck than getting a raise, and his case for why you should stick with working for the same company for a long time. We then talk about the things you need to do so that management thinks of you next time a higher position opens up. We discuss how promotable employees participate in meetings, execute the communication, study their work, and develop best practices. We also talk about when to bring up the idea of being promoted to your boss and a couple of the challenges that can come with advancing in the ranks. After the show's over, check out our show notes at awimp.is/getpromoted. All right, Randy Ornstein, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brett. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
So you got a new book out. It's called Grow, the essential guide to getting promoted. What led you to write a book about getting promotions at work?
Yeah, it's been a very exciting process.
In 300 meters, turn left on 129 Congressional Avenue East.
Writing this book, but throughout my career, mainly in beverages, I was promoted 9 times over my career, and 7 of those times at Anheuser-Busch within a 15-year period. And for me, after a few of those promotions when I was younger, it became a game to me of like how could I continue to grow up the corporate ladder and be successful at this amazing company. And earlier on in my career, when I was low 20s, I would see that the vice presidents had like their own offices and like even gold plates that had their names on it. And I was like, oh my God, how could I ever get to that level? I didn't think I had it in me. And I think I kept getting more confidence when I got promotions early on. I don't think I was doing anything spectacular, but I guess I was doing enough to wow my boss and be the best person for the next position. And so as I've moved up the corporate ladder at Anheuser-Busch and people started to notice, I was periodically asked by this guy who led this program where he hired roughly 30 college graduates every year to join Anheuser-Busch. They would go through a 6-month training program. And at the end of the program, there was a graduation. And I was asked to give the keynote speech to talk about like how I moved up and got promoted at Anheuser-Busch and some tips to succeed. And I did this speech a few times throughout my career. I would usually have just 5 tips. I'd have one slide,
Turn left on 129 Congressional Avenue East.
like, here's 5 tips I learned at Anheuser-Busch to get promoted. And one would be data is power. And I would talk about how I use data effectively with my time working with Walmart or Kroger or Target.
In 3.8 kilometers, turn right on 129 Luzon Avenue South.
And one would be persistent. I talk about how I was very persistent with the people that I work with. And years later, those individuals would come up to me at different meetings or happy hour and say, Randy, I still remember those 5 tips that you gave me, and they've really helped me throughout my career. And, you know, it happened over and over again, and it just stuck. And it got me thinking I should formalize this much better and write a book about them and share them with the world.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You point out at the beginning of your book, a lot of career books and business how-to books and articles, they focus on how to get raises at work, which is, you know, that's good. Mm-hmm. But you make the case that there's a benefit to thinking about how to get a promotion instead of just thinking about how to get a raise. So what are the benefits of thinking about and pursuing promotions within your company instead of just thinking about how can I get a raise?
Yeah, well, first of all, promotions are more monetarily valued at. So usually a promotion means that you get in the range of a 10, 15, 20% raise versus your annual raise that you might get is usually between 2 and 4%. So think about it. If you were to just get a raise in your current job, it would take you like 4 or 5 years to get to the same value had you moved up one level in your company. Plus, when you get a promotion and you move up, you're typically getting a bigger bonus and more equity in that company as well. And so a promotion means moving